Hey friends, my name is Jake and the weather is actually clear here in Alberta right now. Not much smoke in the air. There's a little bit still, but not much. And I'm just wanting to be outside, so that's why we're outside today. This is the Real Steel SACRA, and of course you're going to get a close look of it at it in this video. This is I'm not sure if I want to call it a novel knife. I don't know if this is a new thing. This exact kind of design and what they've done to put it together could be a new thing, but it's just some other older ideas put together in at least a quasi-new way, probably a new way. It's been around for several months. The Real Steel SACRA is a Poltergeist Works design, and it's got a lot going for it. It's also got a few cons, and I want to tell you everything that I think about this knife. First off, the price point, it's a little bit pricier. We've got a crossbar lock. Some people call it, the axis lock. I usually call it the axis lock, but comes in several names. And it's got thumb stud deployment as well. Really good action, actually. And that part is one of the best things about this knife. And the blade shape is another great thing about this knife. And of course, the blade shape and the edge profile and everything, the design, that stuff is the most important stuff. And the handle and the lock, that can be the fun stuff and the enjoyable stuff. And I like it. It's not perfect though. Price point for this, I got it when RealSteelShop.com was doing a promotion on this. I think it was $69 that I paid for it. They charge $89 now. White Mountain Knives charges $89. I bought it directly from Real Steel Shop. Some other stores in the United States have lower prices, like Knife Centers, like $71.20, and Blade HQ, $69.95. And I'll give you the exact full range of specs in metric and in imperial measurements once we get to the tabletop, which we can do in just a second. Let's go back inside, go downstairs, and check out this knife in detail. Keep watching, would you? All right, I've got the denim version here. It comes in 3 different versions of micarta. You got this blue denim, you've got a natural micarta, and you've got a green, sort of like an OD greenish type of micarta. And all of those come with the stonewash version of the blade. If you like a nice black PVD coating, well, then you can get the G10 versions. You got natural G10, which you could dye any color you want, or it's got black G10. Now, I'm sure that I'm not sure. There's probably some exclusives out there, but those are the 5 main ways that this knife comes. Let's start off with talking about this blade shape. What do we got? We got a drop point blade with a swedge that comes at least 80% of the way back to the handle, which is quite nice. It's not super thin, like the swedge does come down on an angle towards the tip, leaving a very fine tip once we focus into that spot. Look at that. That's a very fine tip, and I like that. That's quite nice. A little bit of a rise, and then we've got the flat thumb rest area with the jimping on it. I'd like it to be a tiny bit more aggressive, but pretty good jimping on there. The blade shape's got a long sweeping belly with just a short straight section back here. And like most locks, most knives with this type of lock, we don't have just a separate sharpness choil. The choil, turns into coming back to where the lock bar sits, right in that spot when the blade is closed. And then of course the lock bar sits up here in that cross piece there, back in there when you go to close it, like that. The bar just comes over and spring tension keeps the bar that way, and that keeps the lock. It's a very good lock design, and it's been around now for quite a while thanks to Benchmade. Thumb studs on this knife, they're sort of a gray, I think that's probably anodized, posts that are screwed in, just like the crossbar's got the same kind of gray anodization on it. And it looks nice. It's got a good texture on it. Works really well for deploying the blade. Very happy with that. Get a nice fast deployment. And, once you've got the rhythm down, you can fidget all day long and annoy your neighbors. Or your wife, or whoever you want around to annoy. Really easy to annoy people with this knife, and a little bit fun too. The rest of the stuff I want to talk about the blade, we've got the badging nice and small on the flats, exactly where I prefer it to be. Real steel on this side with their R for the registered trademark, and on this side we've got Jakob's Poltergeist Works right there. And right here it says K110 for that's Bowler K110 carbon steel. It's a nice modern version of D2. Flat grind, not quite to the spine of course, pretty good. The thickness of the steel at the edge is right at 20 thousandths. I don't like it to be thicker than that, but every single time you sharpen this knife, because of the flat sides, it gets thicker and thicker and thicker. So it's at that maximum thickness that I prefer. So I do wish they would have made it come a little bit thinner, but it's not bad. The tip is very useful for delicate work. We don't have a forward choil at all, but it does come forward a ways before you get to the cutting edge. I wish, my finger rested a little bit closer to where the edge of the blade is, for doing harder cutting, but it's not bad at all. That's not a huge distance. So the blade itself, I'm quite happy with it. The stonewash is very fine, feels great in the hand, looks good, it's decent. Now what's a little bit novel about this? Well, the liners are a one-piece liner. See, that's not a backspacer per se. It's the liner bent over. You can see it right here. The liner comes up the side, bends, goes across, bends, comes back down. So a one-piece liner, there's a pin right there to hold it together and the pivot pin, and that's it for holding it together. The liners are okay. They wanted to accentuate this because this is a novel design. They wanted to show it off, and one of the ways they did it is they inset the micarta just a little bit all the way around so you can see the liner everywhere. Unfortunately, I think that was just a little bit of a miss. This edge here where your fingers go when you're gripping it, all you can grip is basically the steel. This is set back far enough that the micarta doesn't help with any of the padding. And so if you need to use this knife for 15 minutes straight doing something that's a little harder to do, and you end up squeezing it, your fingers are going to get annoyed with the pressure on this narrow thing. Now they have smoothed it out. There's no sharp edges, but it is basically just a slightly rounded square edge. If they would have fully rounded that steel, that would have helped a little bit. But the main thing that would have helped here is if the micarta down here would come, a little bit more even with the steel liners. I don't like this. This is the con that I'm talking about. And if you're just going to use it occasionally for small tasks, not an issue. Not an issue whatsoever in that kind of scenario. What else do we have on the handle? Well, the micarta I should talk a little bit more about. We've got 3 sort of notches milled across here. It is sort of a little bit rounded. There's a crown right down the middle. So it's a nice 3D milled micarta. Nicely done. I've used this an awful lot. You can see how polished this area is already. Since I've had this knife for several months, while I was very sick. What else do we have? We've got a pocket clip. It's a deep style pocket clip. It's not right at the end of the handle there, but it's sort of a deep style. It's not very deep this way, and we've got button screw and a flat screw. I don't know. I don't get it. Why would you do one flat screw and one button screw, especially when the flathead screw isn't really recessed at all? It kind of sticks out a little bit. Hopefully I can show you, that on the close-ups. It's just a little bit odd to me. I would have rather had both screws be flat and just, slightly chamfer the pocket clip down there so they can sit flush. Many companies have done that for a long time. And these are T6 screws. Granted, they are nice T6 screws. Where's my T6 driver? The screwdriver sits in there and there's almost no play whatsoever. The flush one, it's a little bit looser, as you can see. It has a little bit of play in there, but it's still quite nice. And the button screw back here is just like that button screw, except for it's more narrow. On this side it comes wider. So each screw has a specific spot that you need to remember to put it back in when you take it apart, or if you transfer the pocket clip to the other side, you need to move all 3 screws well, you need to do that anyways. You have to take them off, but you need to put them back in just the right places if you want it to work as well as the company has designed it to work. So that's that. We've got a nice finger grip here. We've got a little bit of a chamfer on the micarta, quite nice. Nice texture on those pins for the lock bar, which makes it easy to flip around. Except I've learned, because this is a little bit smaller and my hands are just a little bit bigger than average, if I'm doing that, if I end up holding it like this, you know how, see how the fat of the hand comes up a little bit, I could cut myself right there. And so more so than most access lock knives, you got to be careful to hold it back here so that there's nothing that's going to end up getting cut on the blade. I never got cut, but I did, scratch the surface of my skin a few times right there until I just got into a better habit of, where and how to hold the knife when I'm doing that actuating. I think that covers most about this knife. Now let's take some time to take it apart and show you a little bit more about this frame here. Okay, so here I've just taken the micarta off one side, and you can see a little bit more about how it's made with the body pin here. Got a D-shaped pin here, and there's the spring, and we're just going to keep taking this apart. Let's get the spring off, if it comes off easily enough. There we go. And that's a fair bit smaller head and everything than most springs are for this type of lock, but I haven't had any problems with it yet, so there's that. And let's just release the tension on here, and then I can pull the pivot pin all the way out. It's round except for the very end that's got the D shape, which I like. I prefer it like that. And now everything just comes out. And we've got very, very tiny stainless steel ball bearings in there. We've got, 9 of them. There's 9 stainless steel ball bearings in there. And it's super thin. Basically, that's the whole construction. I could take the rest apart, but there's nothing else there. They've got the 3 holes for the weight loss there. And you can see the frame is one piece all the way around. And 3 other things I forgot to mention before. Blade alignment. Look at that. Ideal. Just right. And another thing I forgot to mention was I really wish they would have put a plate in here. Like, Ganzo makes knives less than 1/3 the cost, and they put a little steel plate in there. It just looks sort of unfinished, right? And the pivot screw kept coming loose on me. There is no Loctite in here. I don't like Loctite, so that's okay. I do like thread mate, Vibratite thread mate. That's VC3, and that helps hold it. It's an anti-vibration thread additive, and knives undergo a lot of vibration at that pivot when the blade's deployed. Other thing, actually the 4th thing I forgot to mention was the stop pin. You didn't see any stop pin. Well, the thumb studs are the stop pin as they strike the liners right there. So yeah, pretty nice. Now let's go over all the measurements and specs and all that stuff. First off, the weight. It's a quite light knife, 72 grams. 2.54 ounces is the measurement I got on my scale. The factory sharpness, not quite as good as I had hoped. 220 best is the average. That's testing it 3 times. And that's not quite as sharp as I'd like it to be, but you can certainly make it super sharp using your sharpening system at home. At least I can. Hopefully you can too. The cutting edge length, 79.4 millimeters, 3.13 inches, as I mentioned in the intro. Blade length, tip to the closest spot on the handle, 82.2 millimeters, 3.24 inches. The thickness of the blade stock, 2.93 millimeters, which is 0.1155 of an inch. So not quite 1/8 of an inch, but getting pretty close. The blade depth this way, it's widest right up here off the jimping and near the heel of the blade. 24.6 millimeters, 0.97 of an inch. The thinness behind the grind, 0.51 millimeters, 20 thousandths of an inch on average. And the grind angles. This side's got an average grind angle of 22.8 degrees. This side's got an average grind angle of 21.4 degrees. Now this side is very consistent. Less than 1/10 of a degree change along the length. This side, 22.6 at the start, 23 degrees at the tip. So, 0.4 degrees of change along there. So very consistent, which is better than a lot of knives. The handle length measured straight across, so not like this to get the shortest measurement, but straight across, 103.5 millimeters, 4.07 inches. The grip area, that's between my thumbs right there, rounded just slightly. It's just a bit over 9 centimeters, just a bit over 3.5 inches, which is pretty standard for pocket knives. And the thickness of the handle on the G10, the thickest, the widest points, 12.7 millimeters, exactly half an inch thick. Quite good. The handle depth this way, not counting the blade, is right there. And that is 24.8 millimeters, 0.98. That's the widest point, 0.98 of an inch, that is. And when the knife is closed, the widest point is up here, 27.3 millimeters, 1.07 inches. And the total length of this knife from tip to the very end, that is 186 millimeters, 7.32 inches. It's a pretty good knife. I really like the design for the most part. I do tiny little things like, add a little plate right there so that this side looks a little more finished. But the main thing I would change if I was going to be working on it is bring this G10, the micarta or G10, whichever one you get, down close to this edge, if not right up to this edge. You can leave it exposed here at the back. You can leave it exposed up here because you got that nice rounded edge. But I'd want to be able to use this for some hard use for an extended period of time without this annoying me. That's what I would change. But if you're just going to use a knife occasionally, this is a nice size. If you're allowed to carry knives over 3 inches, I like it. The blade design is really nice. I really like this swedge up here. It pierces quite well. It slices and cuts fairly well. No matter what edge you get on it, it's going to get dull at some point, isn't it? And then you're going to need to sharpen it. So I don't like to judge the factory edge, as the final thought on the knife. You can put a good edge on almost any knife if you know how to sharpen, or you could always send it to somebody to get it sharpened. That somebody could be me. Yeah, I do sharpen knives for customers. Just go to CanadianCuttingEdge.com and check it out. I've got another knife from Real Steel, the Hugin. I think it's a Hugin. I think that's how it's pronounced. I've got one with orange G10, and I'll be reviewing that hopefully before too terribly long. I really hope my health improves faster than it has been in the last 2 weeks, because it's frustrating. And I'm sure you'd like to see more stuff from me too. So I am still getting better, especially today's been one of my best days in a very long time. So I'm very happy with that. And I'll see you guys again the next time I post a review, or maybe I'll just post something shorter. Who knows? I do have some other ideas for some other videos, some Canadian Cutting Edge University stuff, but we'll see when that comes out. Thank you very much to my supporters. You guys are stunning and awesome. Oh, by the way, the previous winner at the beginning of this month, Charles, he chose the Brissa, that little fixed blade knife. Yeah, that's what he chose as his prize. One of my supporters wins a knife of their choice every single month, and they get to choose from a list of the knives that I reviewed previously. So that's really, really nice. I give them a list and let them choose from that. Remember, friends, always cut towards your chum, not your thumb.